I want you to imagine you are in the jungle, hunted by a wild cat, say a lion, even though lions don't live in the jungle, and this cat is not quite the size you'd expect the cat to be. It's sort of larger than a house cat, but not quite as big as an actual lion. Think more in terms of like a bobcat, a lynx, and you're hunted by this lion, but this lion constantly looks at you like this, with a shocked expression on its face, and the whole thing is kind of relaxed and colorful and friendly. Welcome to the world of Henry Rousseau. That's a good opening. Henry Rousseau, this is the sleeve. I removed the sleeve from the book because I don't like sleeves to books. They always end up becoming old, frayed and buckled and, ripped. Here, you can see. Bip, 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 bip. But I guess that's there to protect the books. But I always think the books looks better without the sleeve. Even though here you can see one of the paintings that we are going to be looking at. I could be looking at all of Rousseau. There's so much to talk about, and believe me, I've recorded more than one take on this video, and the last attempt I made turned into 30 minutes. And most of it, actually a lot of it, was just rambling. And I started getting into all sorts of areas that we won't be talking about now. I don't think we need to talk about Orientalism or, problematic aspects of European colonialism. Even though those aspects aren't here to be talked about, just think this is a relaxing place. This is me drinking my water. Cold. But I'm first going to talk about, on the back of this sleeve, it mentions, this is the remarkable story of the private world of Henry Rousseau, master of the naïve. And you might be thinking, as I've been thinking, master of the naïve, that sounds a little bit like an oxymoron. How can you be a master and also be naive? And the thing about that is that it's really just a nice way of saying that Henry Rousseau was a bad artist, but he made interesting art. How can that be? Well, I'll show you. Why don't I? Henry Rousseau Rousseau is a good example of self-taught artist. He is what we could make a whole video talking about outsider art and what it means, but he typically gets referred to as a naive painter. Sometimes you might use the word art brut, which is French, but it means sort of saying brutish art that lacks sophistication. And at the time, especially, we're talking late 1800s, early 1900s. This is the time of the academies. And learning to become an artist at this time, you need to go to one of the academies. Going to the great academies, how you're going to learn all the great techniques. You're going to learn from the masters, and you're going to know how to paint just like them. This is kind of important. This is very important in art history. This is how we eventually get to the Impressionists, who, well worth noting, rebelled against that system and went against academic painting. But even the Impressionists, they came from that background. Henry Rousseau is an example of an artist who did not. He had some training. He has some mentors, as he would put it, but he didn't go to any school. He started painting, I think, at 49, something like that. Well, that's when he became full-time. So there's hope for me yet. But before that, he worked as a toll booth worker or tax collector. There's different terms for it. He worked in a toll booth outside of France, taking taxes on imports. So toll booth. But I think it's important. I think you should think of him as kind of middle class. This is not someone who came from absolutely nowhere. Like he had, he was able to, live the middle class life in France at the time. But, still the critics hated him. And I think fairly reasonably. He is, I'm going to show you. I want to I'm gonna frequently refer to him as being a bad artist, but I also want to put that in context where I like his art, but I think it's bad. But both can be true at the same time. And it's one of those things where I'm a big fan of outside artists. I'm a big fan of folk art. And it's one of those things where if you've seen a lot of art in your time, so much art, it's like with drugs. You start off with cannabis, but inevitably you're going to start taking heroin because you're always chasing that greater high. This is a scientific fact. I smoked cannabis like 20 years ago, I think now. I haven't taken heroin yet, but I know it's inevitable. At some point, I'm going to do it. But it's like that with art. Like when you've seen so much art, nothing really titillates you, makes you feel like a kid again. Like seeing bad art. That's what most of my Instagram feed is, looking at bad art. When I used Twitter back in the day, that was most of my Twitter feed. But I can just show you. I want to focus mostly on, as the title refers to, I want to focus on Henry Rousseau's jungle scenes and his cats. But I can show you one of the things that Henry Rousseau couldn't do was paint different faces. Everything, any person he drew, painted, had the same face. I can show you examples here on the screen. They all had the same kind of weird, the same kind of eyes, the same kind of nose, the same kind of mouth, and even children. And I love his painting of children because they are grotesque. This is a portrait of a child. It's a little bit dark as I'm recording this, so I'm gonna have to edit in a lot of the pictures afterwards. But this is just a fabulous picture. The expression on the face. The child looks like a sort of middle-aged, depressed, like a middle-aged woman or a man, kind of androgynous, made to pose after having, well, secretly thinking about all the wine they want to drink or something. The stubby little fingers. I don't understand how they're sitting. There's sort of something bizarre about all these cliffs that are pointing up like arrows. And here's the child sitting like impaled on one of those arrows. And here's another picture of the child. The child is so wide. And then there's the doll here. The doll has as much expression on its face as the young girl. Here's another picture of a girl who looks absolutely hateful. There's nothing but hate in that girl's eyes. And then she has some flowers and she has a marionette. There is an aspect of this that almost looks surreal. In fact, there is a little image here in black and white of a Picasso painting. And Picasso loved Henry Rousseau. A lot of the early modernists, a lot of the avant-gardists who came along in the early 1900s, they loved Henry Rousseau. Sort of, maybe half jokingly, maybe, with some, it's more sort of tongue-in-cheek. But it's hard to say, because Picasso did genuinely, that's a famous quote by Picasso, that I spent my childhood learning to draw like an adult. I'm paraphrasing. I spent my childhood learning to draw like an adult. I'm spending my adulthood learning to draw like a child. And Rousseau wasn't a child, but he had a certain naïve. That's the kind word. What naïve here is used kindly to describe someone with perhaps not the most skill, all things considered. But there is such characters. There's such emotion that emerges in these characters that probably isn't intentional, but you can pick up on it and love it. And it kind of showed you, especially at the time, with Impressionism and moving onwards, post-Impressionism, a lot of that was about how do you look at the world, how do you see the world, and people became interested in this sort of subjective quality of sight, subjective quality of perceiving the world, especially with the camera coming around, kind of showing you more of a quote-unquote objective take on reality. So people became fascinated with painting's ability to create, to show sort of a genius, some sort of personal touch. And Henry Rousseau certainly had that ingenious way of perceiving the world. But Henry Rousseau was not a traveler. He never really saw much of the world, but he became kind of fascinated by and interested in the jungle. And he was not necessarily alone at the time. There was a lot of fascination in Europe. I'm just going to show you this one as well. I want to focus most. I want to keep the scope of this video smaller, but I keep finding out that I want to show you. This is the soccer players from 1908, and I love how these characters look. Again, all the same faces. The only one who has a slightly different face is the one who's not looking straight at you, because he's punching in the sort of most weird way. Like they all look like paper marionettes, and they all have, he's just throwing the ball up in the air, and there is a sort of mannered aspect to Henry Rousseau that's fascinating. Because he's so he can't show any kind of movement. He doesn't know how to really give a character an animated stance. They all look like they're posing before the camera, not camera. They are the eye of the painter. But I'm thinking of this. But it does remind me actually of early photography, and the way that people at first with photography didn't know how to stand, so they couldn't look natural on cameras. They always had to sort of pose. It does remind me of that. There is this kind of level of artifice to these works that almost become almost like a film over these works. It makes it difficult to take them as real. They feel dreamlike, especially as we're going to get to the jungle pictures. And I'm going to jump ahead now. These are probably his most famous. In fact, the chapter here is called the obsession. I completely lost my ability to speak. The obsession with the jungle. And you can see a little monkey here. Hi, I'm a monkey. That's my impression of a monkey. And you can see a picture of Henry there, looking in all the pictures, he always looks very sort of put together, very middle class in that sense. You can sense that he is someone who wants to project this kind of proper image. But yeah, the critics always hated Henry Rousseau, but the other artists liked him, and that tends to be how it goes. That there's always going to be a lot of kind of painters on favorite painters or musicians on favorite musicians. Such, they never tends to be the ones getting the great critical acclaim. The critical acclaim always tends to go to, the people who are more suave, who are more traditionally sort of able to handle the spotlight. But painters and musicians and other artists, other creators tend to like weirdos, tend to like the oddities, tends to like the people who are not that polished, who have those kind of great flaws. This is the first one I want to show you. This painting is called Surprised! With an exclamation mark. Surprised! That's why I said it. It shows, I want you to first imagine something in your head. It shows a rainfall, and it shows a tiger caught in a jungle as the storm rages and this sudden lightning bolt. Bam! I want you to have that image in your head, and now compare it to the actual painting. Again, I'm gonna put something in editing, but look at that fucking tiger, man. It's great, and look at the shocked face. Completely baffled by the whole thing. Like it never heard the lightning before. And in one hand, this is a quite good composition. You have to say, he's quite good with composition. It's kind of bad in all other regards. Like, it's not a naturalistic picture. by any means. But I'm not sure how much of that is intentional. You never know really how much of it is intentionally kind of stifled and has that artificial dreamlike feel, or how much of that is intentional or not. But one thing I would say about Henry Rousseau that's I would point at really say that this is an example of bad painting is that Henry Rousseau doesn't really know how to do any kind of shading. Any kind of leaves, of petals, or even tree trunks, any kind of surface seems so incredibly flat. Because he does, if you ever, been in the process of learning how to draw, learning how to paint, you know that when you learn first you tend to learn line drawing. That's what most people, as you learn at doing as a kid. It's later on in life, typically during your teenage years, that you learn how to actually color something in. If you, like me, are from a digital generation, you know that you would have your MS Paint, you would draw your little stick figures, and then you would take the button that's the bucket, the fill-in button, and then you would just fill in the different fields, whatever color you want it to be. Eventually you start figuring out, now I'm going to add shadows to these areas. And initially you probably just end up coloring, one side of it slightly darker color, and it gets sort of these very simplistic shadows that doesn't look real, and you kind of feel like shit because I'm shit at drawing. I don't know how to draw proper stick figures. But because what you learn is that in shadow, as you can see with the camera right now, I have sort of blue light coming in from here, I have more orange light, yellow light coming in from here. You can see that there's sort of a red part here in the middle when they meet. You can see that the light because the light bounces with every curve here, so there's gonna be this sort of this gradient is very smooth here, but it becomes very sharp when you get these creases. So this is where you get very dark areas, and in order to do proper shading, you kind of have to get a feel for how the face feels like, the textures, the shape. And Henry Rousseau doesn't do that. All of his everything he draws looks like paper cutouts because he has no real sense of texture. And here's a good one. This is it's a fight between a jaguar and a horse, but it just looks like the jaguar and the horse is dancing. They're dancing together, and it's kind of great. But the horse has just this kind of dead dots for eyes, and the hair is just going everywhere, but it's going two straight lines. It doesn't look real by any means. It doesn't look violent even, and that's something that I would point at. He does a lot of these scenes of animals attacking other animals, like here too. And this is slightly more impact from the body of the tiger going down, but even then there's no blood. There's rarely any gore. He took a lot of these inspirations from photographs. Well, not a lot of times he would go to Natural History Museum and look at their dioramas, and that's really what they feel like. These feel like dioramas, and they don't feel like real life nature. Here's a great lion. Look at that shocked face. It's completely baffled by this guy holding the gun in the most sort of uncomfortable, unnatural way possible. And here's another example where I'm talking about, not really knowing how to do proper shading. Look at this this has a great title. The hungry lion leaps upon the antelope, devours it. The panther anxiously awaits the moment when she too can have her share. Birds of prey have each torn out a piece of flesh from the poor creature, emitting a cry. Sunset. Great title. But you can see so little texture to the antelope. It just looks so flat. And then this great detail here, where you can see there's strips of flesh that's been torn from the antelope, and above you can see these birds with these strips hanging from their beaks. But it's so it's childlike, it's naive because it doesn't look real. It's like he can't even imagine what it would look like when a sort of this predator, bird of prey, would eat meat. There's no blood around their faces. They have these kind of strips of meat just hanging there, completely casually. They're just sitting up in the tree. But and there's also something about just his. There's a lack of perspective. Like this scene is wonderful. This is a wonderful painting, but this little lion is so small and petite and cute. The lion is smaller than the fucking flowers. I guess these are supposed to be bananas, but like the flowers here are so much bigger than the lion, and they're the same. They should be the same size. Well, no, they shouldn't be the same size. They should be at the same sort of level. But this lion should be much further back, seeing how small it is. But this flower is fucking huge compared to the lion. But that sort of this would be avant-garde. Like he's toying around with perspective in a way that other artists at the time don't do. But is it intentional? It's hard to say, you know. Well, no, it isn't intentional. He just doesn't know how perspective works. But then you get some other paintings. I'm gonna show you. This is. Let's see if I can get to it. I might have to fast forward this bit as I'm. One of the disadvantages of using actual books is that you have to go page by page. You can't just scroll forwards or go to a specific page. There's so much beautiful art here, but I can't show you everything. We've already gone past 20 minutes, and I don't want to make any of these go into the half-hour mark. That would be too much. But let's see if I could find the one that I wanted to show you. I think it's soon here. This wasn't one I wanted to show you, but I'll show you. Well, no, here it is. Second guessed myself. That's always been my problem. Here's more of a desert scene. This is called warning for a word that's considered a slur today, but it's called the Sleeping Gypsy from 1897. This is almost cubism, like especially looking at this kind of vase and the instrument here, and the way she's posed. She's completely, her proportions are completely absurd. And if we look at her elbow here, her elbow is at her waist. If she were to stand up with her arms loose by her side, her hand would go down to where her knees are supposed to be. And again, look at this this is a tiny fucking lion. And it's clear that he has, obviously he's never seen a lion. You can't be too harsh on him, because I never seen a lion in real life. I've seen, nature documentaries and stuff, but that's because I'm a modern day human being who has those luxuries. He didn't have those luxuries, so you can't judge him too hard, but there's still something so kind of cute about the sizes of his animals. Because they're always wrong. And there's still that kind of eye. Like he has those fascinating eyes, and that's something that for a lot of these I wanted to sort of explore or capture just for fun. Because I'm always drawn to that. There's something just about the expression again. He has such expressive characters. This is the one I'm going to show you. This is A Dream from 1910. This is probably Henry Rousseau's masterpiece. So if you're going to end on it, as you can see, it's very good. It has a lot of stuff going on, with a lot of these flowers and the naked woman. There's a black woman playing a flute, and of course he is the sort of European artist of the time. He paints a black woman literally black. She's not brown skin, she's black. And there's an elephant with a trunk. And that must be a really small elephant as well, just to be able to squeeze in and sort of hide over there. But there's so much detail, and I love the face of these tigers, well, these lions, I suppose. Just the expression on their faces. And they try to, in this book, to make, well, they make a comparison to Edward Manet's Olympia, which is here in black and white. It's a very famous painting, but it sort of touches upon an interesting topic that I'm not going to discuss here, which is this European thing of, at the time, trying to depict, you're supposed to see the kind of beauty of this white woman by putting her next to a black woman, because the idea of how radiant white skin will shine brighter next to someone who is clearly ugly and undesirable, like a black woman. Problematic. Yes, it is. But I don't really have time to go into that. But he's certainly off his time in that way. And if you want, you can look into, especially there's a lot of critiques to have about Orientalism. But it was very popular at the time. A lot of Europeans wanted to dream away, just to explore other parts of the world, but few people could travel. But you still heard all these stories. But that's about it I want to show you with Henry Rousseau. I can show you as well, just, this is another one. The woman here playing the flute with all these snakes around. I mean, he had a good taste in women. I have to say that. I too like naked women playing flute with snakes. That's what I want in a woman. Like Ian Anderson, but naked and with a dash of Britney Spears. Goodbye, and thank you for this journey. It is slightly too long, but I managed to make it under the 30 minutes mark, and there's no unnecessary digression here. And we stayed mostly on focus, didn't we? Boop.